welcome to the program.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for coming. I knew you'll come a long way. Hey, how did you get into theater?
Well, I got into theater, it was probably about 3 years ago.
Is that it?
Yes.
You're kidding.
Nope, that's it. So,
would you play football or baseball? What did you do?
Okay, so, well, I did play football, but
Right.
this was when I was in Pittsburgh. So I lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years before I just moved down here.
Right.
That's been about a year. So I guess it's been a year, and then 5 years before that I lived in Pittsburgh. So I was getting my PhD in physics.
Yes.
And I was stressing out hardcore.
No kidding.
And everything. And I needed a good outlet. But, and I knew of a theater that was around me that was like 30 minutes north, community theater. And I had never done theater before besides playing in the pit in my college theater.
So what did you play?
I played percussion.
Okay.
So, and I played percussion in high school, so it was just a fun thing, and I just got dragged into it because my friends were going to do it and everything like that.
Well, we always need musicians, so that, that goes.
Right. And so come to find out, they also need actors on stage that are guys.
Usually guys.
Yes. And so they were doing Spam-A-Lot. And they were like, we need guys who can, an ensemble. And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. They had the rehearsal schedule out already. And I was like, I can fit it in. Mm-hmm. And then it just took off from there. And I pretty much did every show that I could after that at that theater for about a year and a half.
Grease paint got you.
Yeah. It actually led to me directing 2 shows in a row and then choreographing the last show.
Choreographing?
As well. So, and then I took a year and a half break, until I moved back down here. And then I did Chicago at the Owen, and now Legally Blonde here. So
wow. So physics, you did finish your degree, right?
Well, kind of. So I ended up.
Well, obviously you had to finish 2 probably to get there. So
yes. So I can back all the way up. So this is a long, long time ago, back in the day. I did an undergraduate, and I got 3 degrees. In physics.
Not triple major. 3 degrees?
3 separate degrees. So it's not, right. So I'm insane. This is the one thing to know, right? So they're very similar, though. So physics, astronomy, astrophysics, and mathematical sciences.
Okay, yeah.
So I did technically qualify for all separate degrees.
Right.
And then I went to graduate school, obviously, at the University of Pittsburgh, in Pittsburgh. And I got very close to finishing my PhD, but I decided to change career paths.
Okay.
And left with my master's. Now.
Okay, so how close did you get? Did you finish your dissertation?
About 3 months. So I had that.
You ABD? But
right. So I had just started writing my dissertation.
Yeah.
I had 2 papers in the works. Already had another paper and a patent.
Right.
And what ended up happening is my lab actually dissolved. Believe it or not.
Dissolved?
Yes. So my advisor left. To go back to Korea.
Yep.
And we had $1 million instrument, so I worked on MRIs.
Yep.
And finding money for me and finding money for the machine was pretty much non-existent. And by that point, I didn't want to quite do physics. I wanted to do something else. And so I was like, and I didn't want to be in academia. So I decided, I need to get back home and which was down here. And I was like, let me just leave and I will reapply for the schools that I want to go to and get my degree in what I want, which turns out to be medical physics.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's very similar, but it's also very different. And getting into medical physics is a lot more difficult now as well.
Really?
Yeah.
What's that?
Because the radiological board, the American Radiological Board, whatever that's called, decides stuff. Yeah. They do... you have to be certified now, and that's a very recent thing.
You didn't have to be certified before?
They didn't have any type of real certification.
Right.
They did in some sense, but it was never really regulated to the degree that it is now. And more to the point that you have to actually go to an accredited school by this board and have a degree or have some form of certification from that school. Right. And that was what was really new. And so I'd have to go and get more schooling anyway if I did finish my PhD.
So they changed the bar. Okay, that's been there, done that.
Sure.
Why?
It's because it's becoming more popular. It really is.
No. We got to have certification here, because that will improve quality.
Yes, absolutely. And so the thing is that what medical physicists do is they, from at least my naive understanding, I suppose, is that they will go into hospitals and they run all of these radiological machines, therapy machines, imaging machines as well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a medical physicist who has an advanced degree. It can be a physicist who has just their bachelor's and somehow fell into that type of career.
Right.
And you didn't really need to understand or know much about the system before going into it so you could learn it. But now as things have become more complicated and more interactive with, say, computers, and the systems have become so advanced, learning them and having an advanced degree, say your master's or your PhD, is something that's practically going to be required now. And so they decided to regulate the whole system for a good reason, obviously, because, even what I do now is related to that, and we do quality assurance on radiological machines all over the world to make sure that they don't overshoot with the incorrect dose or things of that nature, which can be very, very dangerous, obviously. Right. So
insurance has been a big deal in the medical industry. So is this more about risk, or financial risk, or is it really medical risk, or both?
It's probably both. I would say probably more medical risk. Yeah. And, probably don't want to get sued.
That's the financial risk.
That's of course, right.
Kind of minor detail, but yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like that insurance-wise, it's probably not as important. It's probably more just the risks of using a much more complicated instrument, especially that instrument that can do a lot of damage if it goes unregulated, especially severely unregulated. And the more popularity too, because now with institutions coming out with degrees, advanced degrees, they need a way of getting their ducks in a row, I suppose, and saying, well, you need to know this and this and this, and you have to go through this certain criteria, instead of just saying, well, we'll teach you whatever, and then it just goes through.
So you said you played football early?
Yes. Oh, okay. Yes. So that was a long, long time ago. So I played football when I was in high school and in junior high. Right. Went to Oak Ridge High School.
Really? Okay.
Yes. So I grew up around here. I say that, but I've moved just like 17 times in my life. So
17 times.
Yes.
So are you an oil brat, an army brat? What is this?
It's none of the above.
None.
It just happened to be that I followed where my family was, and we just moved from different house to different house. Yeah. Ironically, I've only lived in 3 different states.
But you moved that many times. Right.
Yes, yeah. So, but anyway, so I went to high school here, obviously, close to here in Oak Ridge, and played football. And I was obviously in band, mentioning percussion.
Yes.
And so I played football for 3 years, 2 years in junior high, 1 year in high school. And you'll never guess what position I played. No one ever can guess what position I played.
I haven't a clue. You're running back.
No, I played center and defensive tackle. So I was on the offense and defensive line.
You were the
yes. And despite my size, even though I'm a fairly small guy now, I really wasn't that much bigger then either.
Right.
But I was fast and I was quick.
Right.
And so all the bigger guys were much slower, so I could just kind of go around them and everything. And loved playing. Got the MVP award at the end of the year.
Right.
So that was really exciting. And then I had to choose between band and football. And I chose band. So then I stopped playing football after freshman year.
Yeah.
And then moved straight and just continued playing band because I enjoyed it more. It's not that I didn't enjoy football, but I actually cared about my body and not being beat up too much.
Well, did you get damaged anyway?
The only thing that ever happened was the second to last game that I ever played. I had my hand roll up and snap to my forearm. It did not break anything, but it hyperextended my wrist. Yes. I was still able to play the next game, which is the most important thing, obviously. And that was the only time that I've ever got hurt.
Right.
So I was fairly lucky in the time that I was there. So.
Wow. So do you play anymore? Music?
Music, absolutely. I love percussion. So the last thing that I've done is in that show that I mentioned earlier that I directed and choreographed. Yes. I also played the percussion part. It gets even better. I was also on stage as a character. For various reasons, we had some people drop out and come in and everything, and so I just had to pick up a lot of the slack. Yeah. I didn't necessarily set out to do that. Right. But it just happened, right? Happened. Theater.
Yes, it does. Yes.
And so I still play now. I've actually more moved to writing and composing music. So I self-taught I taught myself music theory. Right. So I can start writing, and because my real heart lies in percussion, I'm writing a percussion ensemble right now. And everything. And so even though opportunities don't present themselves to play very much, I still, can get on the piano every once in a while and do that kind of stuff.
So what kind of music do you compose?
So
style,
style-wise, it's probably most of it's going to be classical, but
really?
Yeah,
classical, yes.
But it will be what I've trained myself is in classical, but I definitely will think that my style when it comes out will be probably still more contemporary because I like the kind of edgier stuff that sits and maybe not necessarily the fluid nature that we have in classical and following all the specific rules that they set and everything.
Well, the rules are a great place to start, but it's not the end all, of course, of everything.
Absolutely.
Yes. So how much of that music is you as catharsis or expression of where you are at the time?
Probably, it's hard not to say 100%, right? Is that, you get into it and, your mood and whatever level of attitude that you are towards life in general has to be kind of a guiding light for you to write. If I feel like if I write something that's empty, that has nothing to do with what's going on in my life, it would be meaningless, and it wouldn't really necessarily be the art that we were looking for, right? Yeah. I do find, though, that because of my personality, I could write very ironical, which sounds strange, right? Yeah. But it's more, it's still, I think, even in that sense, would be a reflection of an inward feeling because of my personality.
Sure. Yeah. So when you look at the early works that you've written and you look back at them, what do you see?
Crap. Mostly crap. It's hard not to be. I guess it's difficult to not be hard on yourself.
Sure.
I look about everything that I've done in the past. It's there's a lot of things that I'm proud of, but I look back and I go, I don't know what I was thinking. This is like the most ridiculous thing, because I go back and I go, well, maybe I can make it better or something along those lines. And then it's just like, no, I have to start basically from scratch.
Well, it was a reflection where you were at the time. That's fine.
Sure, absolutely. And, I can respect that, but it didn't have to be so shitty. Right? So
that's the part that kind of hurts. Like, ooh, Kaz was that?
I know. I was such a brooding teenager. Oh, this is...
Well, this is interesting because let's talk about the physics. You obviously went a long time thinking, this is the career path. What was that moment that changed? Well, was it a moment or was it over time?
It was gradual. It was gradual, I think. So what happened was when I left undergraduate, and I love physics, don't get me wrong. It's a great thing to study. And when I left, I was debating whether to be a doctor, more specifically a neurosurgeon, or just go get my PhD in physics. Well, they paid me to get my PhD in physics.
Okay, so
and they paid for my school, so it made my decision a little easier. Right. But then I started going through school, and albeit I did enjoy it, it was something where I found a lot of trouble trying to find an outlet in physics where I could help people. So, being ambitious as I was, I wanted to be a particle theorist. Okay. And that helps nobody at all in the world.
Well, seemingly. Anyway.
No, it just doesn't do it. And so it really, even though I enjoyed it, it was pure enjoyment. That was the only reason that drove me. And I always felt like that if I want to do something, that it should kind of contribute to society.
In some way,
in some sense, you know. And not to say that doesn't, but more, I guess, a more grounded view and a more direct way to affect people. And so, I essentially started to pull further and further away from being a theorist. So I decided, well, let me be an experimentalist, and then further and further away from physics.
Right.
And that actually is what landed me where I did my research.
Right.
So I did research in radiology.
Right.
And we developed new sequences for MRIs to study cancer, stroke, Alzheimer's, all neurodegenerative diseases. And I really that's what I really wanted to go to, but it wasn't quite there because we were at the beginning stages where we were still in the development. And even though I really enjoyed it, it was something that I wanted to be in the forefront, working with patients and getting kind of that experience. So it was kind of a gradual transformation. I'd always had that interest in the medical field, but it took a little bit for me to kind of gradually learn that I want to push down a different path than necessarily the one that I was on.
So let's talk about this role that you have. How much of this role is you, and how much of it is just pure fantasy?
I assume you're just specifically
We're talking about Legally Blonde, Warner.
Okay,
We're talking about Warner now. Yeah.
Okay. So it depends on who you ask. Most people that you ask will say, well, he's 100% just me because I'm the asshole typecast to a T. But I will say that, I'll give credit where credit's due. I will say that, maybe like 60% of it, I can relate to, 40%, not at all. And when I say the other 40%, it's like absolutely 100% far away from being me. I didn't grow up, obviously, having any privilege. I'm definitely not a third of anything. And so, I can't relate to that.
Right.
I'm also not necessarily a very selfish person. I think everyone is in some sense, but it doesn't suit me very well. I can be very condescending, I've been told, and I know that because I'm very hard on me, and so I think
you expect that of others as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And so I find that I can relate to that and being frustrated by certain points or people not following my sense of justice, even though in the show I think that his sense of justice is really screwed up, definitely off kilter, and probably from where he grew up from, and being, I guess he's not an only child, but kind of that affluent background. I find mostly though that, like I said, 40% definitely not me, but 60%, trying to break into your own and follow your dreams and everything that, that's admirable in some sense. And I will say, I've always felt this way, that I don't think Warner is the bad guy in this show, especially compared to Callahan. But that he's just selfish, and he thinks what he's doing is right. But, if you take a step back, obviously it's something that is not right. And it makes it look even worse because, the show is obviously about Elle.
Right.
And pushes you to be on her side, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But I find that, Warner has his own, actually great story arc through this. He doesn't really grow up too much in it. Yeah. But, you can, looking at this from that perspective, I think that you can find that he's, just trying to do the best that he can. He wants to be something. Yeah. And so he does what he thinks is best to get to that point.
It's kind of interesting. When you look at in terms of characterization, I think we can find a lot of ourselves in all these different characters, whether we want to or not. and I especially think in my younger days, when it was important to be a PhD. Okay, and after getting there, you know what? It's not that big a deal. It's really not that big a deal.
Right.
But that's very Warner, right? It's about the status, right? And what you need to achieve to get the right look, the right whatever.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's our goal. Nothing wrong with that, but you learn as you grow. It's not all there is to life.
Sure, absolutely. But I mean, we are in a sense a product of our experiences.
Absolutely. So.
And the more we live, the more experiences we get, and so our views can change in that sense. And I feel like Warner, in himself, doesn't ever grow up, though, because he becomes a model, right?
Yeah.
He's just, he's out for the status and the easy way.
Yeah.
Even though he goes to Harvard Law.
Yeah.
But obviously, through getting the internship in the musical and stuff like that, you find that he goes, this stuff does come easy to him. Mm-hmm. Or at least that's the sense that I get from him. But going back to your earlier comment when you said that in theater, especially, you always find yourself in a lot of the characters. Yes. But I feel like that's what makes musicals in theater and plays great in itself. Yeah. Is that we sensationalize certain aspects of our lives to create characters on stage. And so it's so easy to say, well, if this person specifically has this one flaw or attribute that we can really latch on even to a little bit of it because it's so over-exaggerated, because it's from musicals or theater and things like that. And that's kind of what we go for, at least in my mind when I see it.
Musical theater tends to allow over the top. That's about that one. But you know what? Like, especially for this show, you kind of subtly can get your message in there still, too, even beyond all the other stuff that's out there.
Absolutely.
What roles haven't you done that you'd like to do?
What I haven't done? Yep. Oh, well, that's okay. So are we talking dream roles here?
Anywhere, you name it.
Okay, so if I had one role that I'd really want to do is I would want to play Jekyll and Hyde in Jekyll and Hyde. One, and it's more for the fact, obviously, being the lead character. Yeah. But just the style of music is very similar to the style that I enjoy outside of musical theater. And then the part would be so challenging. And I always look for that next challenge, that next step up, that I can make myself better and really have to struggle to get to the point to where I want it to be. Right. And I feel like that role would absolutely lead towards that, and it would be very difficult. It would just be incredible.
You're up for that challenge.
I am up for that, absolutely. And I live my life that way, trying to push myself to the next point further and further, almost trying to find my breaking point.
Well, it's kind of interesting because, we've talked to people, and some people, they just want to get along, so just tell me what I got to do, and they just do the absolute minimum they got to, and they're fine with that, and they move on to it because that's not that important in their life. Right. But you like those challenges, whether it sounds like you're doing your musical composition, whether you're acting. What makes you driven in that sense?
Well, it's interesting because I can actually tie a lot of the things that we talked about together. So when I was born, going way back to that, I actually was born 2.5 months premature. And the doctors told my parents that they say, hey, you might as well call the family. He's going to die. He's definitely not going to make it. 3 major surgeries later, I was released from the hospital about 4 years, in and out. And from that, I guess, in high school, and, when you're a teenager and you are growing up and trying to figure out life, and you have all these mini existential crises that you have to deal with. And growing up with knowing that, right? You always ask these questions like, why did I go through all of this, blah, 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 and everything like that. And I feel like I've always felt like I'm on borrowed time because of that.
Really?
And so I want to go and experience everything there is to experience. Right. And the only way that I think I can do that is if I go and I challenge myself and I push myself to be, the best that I can be and the best at whatever I am doing. Right. And so I really pride myself, almost to a fault, to go and seek out challenges that almost border on the line of absurdities to see how far I can go, to see how, it's kind of almost to compensate for what happened. Right.
You're going to be the firework. You're going to go out, but you're going to go out in a blaze of glory.
Right. And in some sense, it's great. It's wonderful because I just love living on the edge of the seat and just being like, okay, what next? What next? And how much can I do in this life and experience? And
so, is that true of anybody else in your family? Into the family tree, did people die early? Did they have all these type of medical challenges?
as much as you would think.
Right.
Not that I know of.
So there's not a history of that.
Mm-mm. So there actually is not necessarily a genetic component that happened.
Yeah.
That what happened to me. So it just was one of those things to where, I mean, I was the third child, and my mom's kind of short, so definitely I was going to be premature regardless, probably because she was short, and it just a circumstance. It just happened to fall out that way, and thank goodness I'm here now, right?
Well, it was kind of interesting. You got a second chance really early in life, but you said no genetic history, doesn't seem to any kind of genetic relation. I mean, you sound like your parents probably, and grandparents have lived a reasonable life.
Of course, a reasonable. Definitely.
You should be able to live a reasonable life. But you have this feeling that you don't.
Well, it's not.
Potentially.
It's not necessarily that. I'm not worried about, I guess, if you want to go so far as to say not living a long life.
Right.
That's not what bothers me. It's just more that I don't want to get caught 10, 15 years down the line and say, well, all in my youth I could have done all of this and everything, and then I don't want to turn it on later in life.
Right.
So, when I was really in college and I came to this conclusion, it was more that I wanted to say, okay, I know what I want in life, and I can be sure of what I want, so I'm going to go for everything that I want. Yeah. And so essentially what I did is I wrote a bucket list. So you say that I don't have
but you've got this bucket list you're trying to go through no matter what.
And I mean, I have like 250 things on it.
Oh my goodness.
And I mean, they range from the absurd to very simple things.
Right.
Just the things that I want to get out of life and pursue, and challenges that I want to meet. Yeah. So, one I can even mention that seems to be the most impressive. It's okay, but right now I'm currently working on the running a marathon in each state.
Wow.
And so I'm up to 31 now.
31 states.
Yep.
Wow.
And after this show closes, starting in September, I will actually be running a race every weekend for 2 months in a different state to try to complete it. So I have about another year left to try to get the next 19. And then that's just one of those things to where, I find something that I want to challenge myself, like running a marathon. Right. And I push it to that next level. Right. And it's not that I'm the first person to do this or anything like that, but it's just that extra step of that challenge to really make sure that, I really beat this. It's not it's not like, oh, I did it, yay, congratulations. And it's not selling a marathon short. No. In any stretch of the imagination.
No, absolutely
not. It's just pushing that even further, pushing the envelope, trying to really get everything that I can out of it.
So, when you're doing this bucket list, is it really the accomplishment or is it the journey?
I mean, it has to be the journey. I mean, the accomplishment's great. And I don't actually tend to like to talk about the things that I've done. Right. Because there are other reasons that I do a lot of these things. Right. And obviously the journey means so much more. Mm-hmm. Because when I finish the race, say, for example, a marathon and everything, all I have is a medal and a t-shirt. And I did it. It's great. But, the training that goes into it, the mental challenge that comes into finishing the race and pushing yourself and experiencing traveling to different states and all of that, all of that's going to add up more to experiences than any medal that you're going to get, right? Or any t-shirt or the ending, Yeah. And because of my ambition being so high, it's also that I accomplish something and I say, okay, this is great. Yep. And I take one step past the finish line and I say, okay, well, what's next now? Yeah. Which I've been accused of saying that that's not a very good way to look at things because I should revel in some sense in my accomplishments, but I try not to because I don't have time to. I say, okay, it's time to move on. What's next? And it's not that I don't appreciate the things that I've done. It's just with so many things wanting, pulling my attention, I have to just stay focused.
Well, it's kind of interesting that it seems that you very much live in the now, which is important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you say that, but I have like the next 7 years planned out.
No, hey, the most hardcore I heard is that a friend of mine moved to California, and his wife had already planned out every weekend what they were doing, every place.
Wow.
So they were going to make maximum use of their time in California. It's like, we already know what we're doing for the next year. When he went, the whole family went on vacation, and he was left to do chores at home. Mm-hmm. He had a list of 60 things to do. And we're not talking about little things like wash the dishes. This is more like paint the house, and it just goes like, what? It's sort of hardcore. I get that. And so I understand that passion. Where does that passion come from? You said you were given a chance, but it can't be just that you were given a second chance. A lot of people give a second chance.
Sure, absolutely. And, there are the second reason that I'd probably give. Let me back up. One is I am very much like my mother. Uh-huh. And so I would definitely 100% say that passion, seeing her with the passion that she has for life and the passion, growing up and everything and seeing that, it really had a strong influence on me. And so I would definitely say that that's part of it.
Sure.
That comes into it. And then the second thing is, and this is going to be the incredibly cheesy, not like the mom thing, it's cheesy, but one thing that really drives me is that when I become a dad, when my kids come to me and they say, hey, I want to do this, I want to experience this, I want to be able to have so much experience in every aspect of life that I can. That's odd.
What's testing the high minor cups?
Right. That I want to be able to answer them and relate to them and be able to help them accomplish any goal that they want to, because I've experienced so much in my life.
Right.
And so that, I guess all of those things kind of combined really pushes for that passion. And I feel like also too, in a selfish kind of sense, that, why wouldn't I want to be the best version of myself?
Right.
And so that in itself can fuel my drive and my passion to really get to where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. So you said the next 7 years planned out. What are some of those things, adventures that you're looking at?
Sure. So I'm going to complete my marathons, obviously.
Yes.
Next June, I'll finish with Hawaii, so that'll be very exciting.
Wow. Yes.
Then I'll move on to doing an Ironman and a half Ironman.
Oh my goodness.
Just one of those. I'm not going to do 50 of those. But then, very exciting, is I'll start pursuing the 7 summits, which are the tallest mountains on each continent. And
oh my
you have
goodness.
to summit each one of them. That'll take a long time to do.
That's going to take a while. Yeah.
Money is the key there.
Yes.
But then there's other things. So working now at MD Anderson, I'm going to start taking classes there to pursue my PhD in medical physics.
Yep.
So I can increase my knowledge there and everything. And that's pretty much the limiting factor of my 7-year plan.
Yeah.
Because I'll work and go to class, and then I'll eventually move to write my dissertation to going into that. Theater is a big thing. Mm-hmm. I'm going to continue theater because, one, I love it so much. Mm-hmm. But I want to move up in theater too.
Sure.
And so I want to get down into Houston, move into like semi-professional theater, things like that. Build up my resume, obviously, before that. Start taking acting classes and singing lessons and things of that nature. And then the last thing is opening up my own online business is the next thing.
What would you do with online business?
So I want to sell all of my own artwork. And
what about music? You said you're going to have music too.
I want to do that. So I want to produce my own music.
Yes.
I want to sell my art. I love painting. I want to sell my books. So I'm also a writer. So any artistic avenue that you can think of, I very much enjoy expressing myself through. Sure. And basically sell my own works. It doesn't have to be successful. Though, I mean, obviously my ambition pushes me to be successful in it. But it's more just getting my opinion out there and getting my, feelings and the way that I view the world, out to other people.
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily force my opinion on anyone else, but, if people need guidance or whatever, it's not necessarily such a horrible thing, I think.
So where do you find the time to do all this stuff?
I don't sleep.
Yeah, sleep is overrated.
At all. I get like 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night.
And you're okay?
For the most part, it depends on who you ask. But I mean, it's kind of one of those things to where you find a way to really pursue it. And even if it's just a little bit here, a little bit there,
right.
And there are a lot of things that are really good at schedules, like taking classes. Obviously, they have to be at a specific point. Rehearsals for theaters, when shows are going to be, that kind of thing. Marathons are a given amount of time. And so then you just fill in the small gaps with, even if it's 30 minutes here, an hour there. And you say, okay, well, I just want to sit down and write for a little bit. And sometimes it's nothing that you're working on. It just happens to be one small little nugget of an idea that you had, and then maybe it blossoms into something, or it blossoms into something really shitty, which I've talked about earlier. Or, it's very possible, obviously. And then, or, maybe it doesn't turn into anything. It's just getting that. Yeah, absolutely. Because, you just get that creative outlet to let it flow, and then you get kind of a synergy between all of the activities that you try to do, and then you don't mind being so tired so much, especially as you get all these things done.
What's the biggest limit in terms of your mind, your body, spirit, that one that you keep running into? The biggest challenge.
The biggest challenge. See, it's hard not to say that I just don't have enough time. But I think that would be a lie. I feel like the time is just something that I'm going to have plenty of. And it's hard not to get stuck into that too. It's hard not to say, well, I'm still young. I still have all this other time. But my ambition is so bad that it's like, okay, well, I don't want to wait for that other time to come. I want it now, like you were saying, living in the moment. But really, I can't say that there isn't a limiting factor. Not yet that I've found. And that may sound very egotistical. Actually, it is very egotistical to say that. But it's also a great view of it. Because if I sit and I say that I have no limit, then I can always push myself beyond whatever limit I run into. Whether that, let's say I hit writer's block, right? And I have like really severe writer's block. Well, if I sit and think, oh man, I have writer's block, this is going to be terrible, then I'm never going to get past it. But, if I can just sit and say, okay, well, something will come to me. Let me go do something else. And then all of a sudden, boom, all this pops up, and then it's not an issue anymore. It's never a limiting factor, because I can always push myself past it. And that's kind of what I'm looking for, right? Is I'm looking for that limit. I'm looking for that breaking point, saying, when will I fail? Which there's plenty of things that I failed at. Don't get me wrong. But it's more like, when can I stop myself? When do I run out of avenues and things of that nature? And I feel like that would never happen, and that I would never reach that. Because, especially for the human capacity to accomplish things is unlimited, I think, or at least definitely severely untapped.
Physical ailments or something like that. Does your knees ever bother you?
Knock on wood, I've run 31 marathons.
Because it's got to be hard on you. But,
Well, even despite all the surgeries and stuff that I had, and and I will say, the doctor told me, he goes, Hunter, you'll never be able to run even if you're able to walk. That's what they originally told me, And obviously that did not turn into. And doctors tend to be worst case scenario, so you don't get your hopes up too much and everything, and more probably to cover their ass. Let's be honest. But physical limitations, I really have not reached any besides what I determined to be a physical limitation. Like how fast I run for these marathons. And I'm very slow. I'm more of a short distance runner, and I'll totally admit that. But I still get it done. I still finish, and it's still in a reasonable time. It's not like it takes me a long time to run these or anything like that. But physical limitations, if I ever get to a point where I have a physical limitation, I will work to get past it. And I've never reached one where I can't work past it. So lucky for that. That's also why I'm running my marathon so quickly. Because I don't have to train for every single one if I run them back to back. So that's less miles on my joints specifically. And then I'm still be young to heal enough to move on. And so that's also why I'm rushing to get these done. Because I really don't want to have those problems.
No, you don't. It sounds like you have an incredible power of the mind. No way you can do all this without incredible willpower. How did you develop that?
It's funny.
Or did you even notice that over time? I mean,
it had to have been gradual. I can't. Let me think. That's flabbergasted by this question. I mean, it's more just getting past the point where. No, I'll say this. Yeah. Erase all of that. Yeah. What it really is that I'm a very religious person, and I think that in my religious studies and reading the Bible and everything like that, I really find that we are so capable of so much. Yes. And that we are given so much opportunities. A lot of them wasted. Unfortunately. And I feel like that if I can go and I have faith in whatever I can do, and I have belief in myself, then I can accomplish it. You know, that sometimes in our lives we can be bigger than ourselves. We have to be bigger than ourselves. And so we come to a point to where there is no limit, right? Especially if you don't believe it to exist. It's almost, where was I going with this? This sounded really good in my mind.
No, so because were you always religious, or did you have an epiphany? And then
much,
it was like, whoa!
I've always had a respect for religion. Yeah, and it's funny because a lot of physicists that you meet are actually not very religious at all.
That's right. And they'll say that. Yes,
they'll say yes. But the thing about it is the more that I delved into it, the more that I found that there has to be something behind the veil, because even from the perfectly beautiful equations that we can see, and just how precise things can work, down to the quantum mechanics where we have no fucking clue what's going to happen. And that there are so many possibilities. We sit and we think that, we find that there must be something behind it. There's things that we can't know. There's questions that we don't ask. Right. And so I've always had an eye for a philosophical kind of connection between the real world and I guess the veil behind the world, if there even exists that, right? And so finding that connection and really pushing that helped solidify my religious fervor, I guess, in some sense. But going back to your original question, I suppose that it had to have been gradual to come into it. Sure. Kind of developing my own philosophy in life. Yeah, sure. Kind of saying, well, okay, this is my guidance, and then let me build off my experience to try to fit all of the pieces in, and trying to determine, that existential question, why am I here? Why did I survive all these problems? I'm trying to find that answer always. Sure. Always pushes you. Yes. Always. It has to. Yeah. Because unless you don't want an answer, then you kind of ask, what's the point of life in some sense, or why would you live here, or why would you do anything?
Right. Absolutely.
So, and you don't want to go down that bunny hole, because that's just made for disaster.
All right. I'm going to ask the question we've been asking everyone. Okay. If heaven exists, what do you want God to say when you get to the pearly gates?
Very simple, is I just want him to say that I did a good job.
Why didn't you go to Puerto Rico? That's going to be the 51st state of the marathon.
Well, if it does become a state, then I will totally run it. But and it's funny that you say that too, because a lot of people are like, well, why don't you keep running? Yeah. Because I've gone out and I've run with people who they're like on their 8th time to do the 50 states. Yeah. And I'm 8th time? Yeah, these are very old people. And I go, first of all, my poor joints. Yeah. Second of all, I want to do something different. I don't even like running. And you're right. And there it is. And I like running to a certain degree, just not that much. Just not that much. Yeah. But yes. But going back to your question, your previous question, not Puerto Rico, not quite a state yet, not including territories. It's just more that I want to make sure that I experience everything life has to offer. And that when I finally go to heaven and God says, good job, Hunter. You did what you were supposed to. You experienced everything, and you were a good person. Yes. Now, come on in, and experience everything that heaven has to offer.
I'll ask you one more question that's related.
Yes.
When you go through all these different, your bucket lists, you experience God.
Absolutely. Without God, I would not be able to do any of this. And I have to understand that regardless of anything that I do, he would have to be with me to accomplish anything. And then even if I accomplish nothing, it doesn't mean that my life was a waste.
And he's still there.
Because in the end, that's all that will really matter.
Thank you so much for being with us, man.
Thank you so much.
Take care.